itself, setting flames to the barn, then the storage shed, destroying piece by piece everything her family had built over 5 hard years in the Arizona territory. Now, with the sun climbing higher and the air shimmering with heat, Sarah felt a pair of eyes upon her. She turned. A single Apache warrior sat astride a painted pony not 30 feet away. His gaze was steady, piercing, and strangely calm. He was younger than she expected, perhaps 30 summers, with strong cheekbones, long black hair, and eyes that held intelligence rather than cruelty. He dismounted, his movements smooth and quiet as a mountain cat. Sarah's hand twitched toward the rifle she had dropped earlier, but he made no threatening move. Instead, he walked toward her, step by measured step, until he stood close enough for her to see the beadwork on his war shirt and the glint of a silver ornament in his braid. When he spoke, it was in accented but clear Spanish. "You will come with me tonight." The words hung between them like a challenge. Sarah understood Spanish. Her mother had been from Sonora, but she had never expected to hear it from Apache lips. She should have run or screamed. Instead, she found herself staring into his eyes, searching for meaning in them. There was something there she didn't expect, something human. "I saw you," he continued when she didn't answer. "When we came, you did not run. You stood with your rifle, ready to die protecting this place. But when the fire reached the house, you ran inside. Not for gold, not for food. You saved books." "Why?" Sarah swallowed hard. "They were my mother's," she said softly. "Books of poetry from Mexico." Something flickered in his expression, understanding perhaps. "When Broken Arrow knocked you down, when he raised his club, you spoke. Do you remember what you said?" Quote. She did. The word had escaped her lips in that moment of terror, unbidden, a word learned long ago from an old Apache woman who traded at the settlement. "Shima," she whispered. "Mother." He nodded slowly. "Yes, you called for your mother in my language. Broken Arrow's mother died last winter. He could not strike you after that." He circled her slowly, his eyes sharp but not cruel. "I am called Grey Wolf by your people. My true name is Chinchuk. I lead what remains of my band. Disease and bullets have taken many. We need women who are strong, who can survive what comes." "You're taking me captive," she said, her voice steady. "I am asking you to come," he replied. "Your ranch is gone. When your men return, they will find only ashes. They will think you dead." "Perhaps that is better." "Better?" Sarah's anger rose like a spark from the fire behind her. "Better to be a slave to the people who destroyed my home?" Quote. He straightened, his tone firm. "Not a slave, never a slave. My woman, if you choose. If you say no, if you refuse me tonight or any night, I will not force you. My word is iron." Sarah stared at him, trying to understand. This Apache warrior who spoke of choice, who stood among the ruins of her life as if he were part of some test. She thought of the life her father wanted for her. The banker's son in Tucson with soft hands and cold eyes. A man who looked at her like a purchase already made. "Why me?" she asked quietly. He looked toward the horizon before answering. "Because you are different. Because you saved books instead of gold. Because you spoke our word in your final moment. Because I am tired of taking. I want something chosen, something given freely." The other warriors had gathered in the distance, watching in silence. Sarah knew she stood on a thin edge between two lives, the one behind her, burned to ash, and the one before her, uncertain and wild. "If I come," she said carefully, "what then?" "Then you learn our ways, you work with our women, you eat what we eat, sleep where we sleep. If soldiers come, you run with us. If we starve, you starve with us. But you will be respected. Any who dishonor you dishonor me. And if I want to leave, then you leave," he said simply. "But not tonight. Tonight you decide only whether to come. The rest," he gestured toward the endless desert, "we discover as we go." Sarah looked back at the ruins of her home, at her mother's books lying in the dust. Her mother, who had married a rancher against her family's wishes, who had taught her poetry by lamplight, who had died giving birth. What would she have done? "What if I had said no?" Sarah asked. Grey Wolf's lips curved slightly. "Then I would have ridden away and found another way to save my people. But I hoped," he paused. "I hoped that a woman who saves poetry from fire might understand a people trying to save their songs from silence." The wind stirred, carrying the scent of sage and smoke. Sarah felt something inside her shift. For the first time, the fear loosened its grip. She looked at the warrior standing before her. The man who had destroyed her world yet somehow offered her something her own world never had. A choice. "I'll need to gather my things," she said quietly. Grey Wolf nodded solemnly, as if a sacred pact had been made. "Be quick. We ride before the sun reaches its peak." As Sarah turned toward the ruins, she heard him speak to his men in Apache. She didn't understand the words, but she caught her name. Nada, the one who saves books, the keeper of words. She packed only what mattered. Her mother's books, a change of clothes, her sewing kit, and the small pouch of herbs she used for healing. When she emerged, Grey Wolf brought her a spare pony. "Can you ride?" he asked. "Better than most men." This time he smiled. "Good. We have far to go." As she mounted the pony, she caught her reflection in a broken piece of mirror on the ground. A smoke-stained face, wild hair, and eyes that burned with something new. Freedom. The war party moved out. Grey Wolf rode beside her. "You are afraid," he said. "Yes," she answered, "but you will come anyway." Sarah nodded. "My mother used to say courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it." Grey Wolf looked ahead toward the desert. "Then your mother was wise." The wind carried their words away as they rode toward the horizon, the ashes of her past fading behind her. The sun burned high above the desert by the time they reached the Apache camp. Hidden between tall canyon walls, it was smaller than Sarah expected. A handful of shelters made from brush and hides, smoke rising in thin streams toward the pale sky. Children paused mid-play to stare. Women stopped grinding corn and stood silent, eyes filled with suspicion. Every man who remained rested a hand on his weapon until they saw Grey Wolf dismount. Sarah sat on her pony, her heart thudding in her chest. The desert wind carried the smell of smoke, roasted corn, and leather. She felt every stare like a touch. An older woman stepped from the largest shelter. Her face was weathered but proud, streaks of silver running through her dark hair. The way the others moved aside told Sarah this was someone important. Grey Wolf's mother, perhaps. The woman spoke sharply in Apache, her tone cutting like a blade. Grey Wolf answered with calm strength, but tension rippled through the camp. Sarah caught her own name, Nada, mixed among words she couldn't understand. The crowd murmured. Finally, Grey Wolf raised his hand for silence. He turned to Sarah, switching to Spanish. "Tell them why you came." Sarah's throat tightened. Every eye was on her. She swung down from the pony, her legs shaking from the long ride, but her back straight. "I chose to come," she said clearly. "No one forced me. I came because—" She hesitated, her voice trembling, then steadied. "Because I was already a prisoner in my own world. At least here, I was given a choice." A hush fell. Then the older woman stepped forward. "I am Itachu," she said in accented English, "mother of Chenchuk. You say you chose. We will see if you choose to stay when you learn what choice means here." She gestured sharply. Two younger women approached. "You will work. You will learn. You will earn your place, or you will leave. My son leads the warriors, but the women decide who belongs. Understand?" Sarah nodded. "I understand." "Good," Itachu said. "Then you start now." The two women, Nadza and Kaiwan, led Sarah to a small shelter at the camp's edge, bent saplings covered with hides and brush. Inside lay a thin blanket and baskets filled with dried plants. "You sleep here," said Kaiwan in halting English. "Work starts before sun. You miss work, you no eat." They showed her where to fetch water, where to leave waste, where wood was gathered. Everything was simple, but purposeful, nothing wasted. Every part of the camp ready to move at a moment's notice. That first night, Sarah lay awake on the thin blanket, staring up at the small opening in the roof. The stars looked different here, closer somehow, brighter. She thought of her father and brother, of the ashes of their home, of the man sleeping somewhere nearby whose quiet eyes haunted her thoughts. When a shadow appeared at the doorway, she tensed. It was Grey Wolf. He didn't enter, he simply sat cross-legged outside, his voice low. "You did well today," he said. "My mother is hard but fair. She has seen too many die to trust easily. She doesn't want me here." "No," he agreed, "but she respects courage. Show her yours, and she may change her mind." He was silent for a while before speaking again. "I had a wife once die. She died 3 winters ago with our son. Sickness came from the white man's world. Many died. I swore I would never take another wife. But we are few now. Our people need children or we will disappear." Sarah's heart tightened. "So that's why you brought me, to bear children?" Quote. Grey Wolf's voice softened. "I brought you because when I saw you save your mother's books, I thought, here is someone who understands that some things matter more than life. My people's stories, our ways, they matter too, but they will die unless someone helps carry them forward." Sarah hugged her knees, listening. "I don't know your stories." "You will learn," he said, "if you choose to stay." He shifted slightly, the firelight from the camp flickering across his face. "I will tell you of my life, and you will tell me of yours. That is how we begin." Through the long night, they talked quietly. Grey Wolf told her of his childhood racing horses across open plains before soldiers came in force. Of his first raid at 14, both proud and afraid. Of his wife die and their son. Of watching his father die fighting for their land. Of taking leadership too young, with too little wisdom, but with determination to keep their people free. In turn, Sarah told him of her mother, the gentle woman from Sonora who had loved poetry more than propriety, of learning to read by firelight, of her father's disappointment that she wasn't a son, of the lonely life on the ranch, the endless work, and the quiet realization that she was being shaped for a life she didn't want. When dawn lightened the sky, Grey Wolf rose. "The women will work you hard," he warned. "Some will be cruel. Show them your strength through endurance." "And Sarah," he added, her white name sounding strange in his voice, "remember that you chose this. When it becomes hard, remember why." The days that followed blurred into exhaustion. Sarah rose before sunrise, grinding corn, carrying water, scraping hides. Her hands blistered, her muscles burned, but she said nothing. Nadza proved patient, showing her which roots healed and which harmed. Kaiwan was sharp-tongued and distant, but Sarah sensed sadness beneath her bitterness, the kind that comes from loss. The children were the first to accept her. Curious about her light hair and pale skin, they crept close when she worked, giggling when she tried Apache words. She began teaching them simple Spanish phrases in return, trading laughter for understanding. Each night Grey Wolf came to her shelter. He never entered, only sat outside, sharing stories. Slowly, she began to understand more of his world, the hunger, the pride, the pain of watching their land shrink with each passing year. She listened as he spoke of freedom not as rebellion, but as birthright. By the second week, Sarah had found a rhythm, rising with the sun, working through the day, sleeping when the stars returned. Her body grew lean and strong, her skin bronzed by the desert light. She learned to say simple phrases, to understand the quiet language of survival. It was Itachu who finally showed the first sign of approval. Sarah was struggling to scrape a tough hide when the older woman approached. "You do it wrong," she said bluntly, taking the tool. "Use your body weight, not your arms." She demonstrated, then handed it back. "You have not complained. That is good. Complaining changes nothing." Sarah smiled faintly. "My mother used to say the same." Quote, "Then maybe your mother was wise," Itachu said before walking away. That night Grey Wolf smiled when Sarah told him. "She begins to soften," he said. "This is rare." "Your mother is formidable," Sarah said. "She has had to be," he replied. "She buried her husband and 3 children. Without her we would have scattered long ago." "And what of you?" Sarah asked softly. "What keeps you here when you could run to Mexico, live free?" Grey Wolf looked toward the canyon walls. "This land is our blood," he said simply. "Every mountain knows our names. Every river carries our stories. To leave is to die another way." He turned to her, his eyes shadowed but sure. "But perhaps there is another path, one that keeps what matters while changing what cannot be stopped." "What do you mean?" "You will see," he said. "If you stay." The next morning, the call came from the scouts. Soldiers had been sighted 2 days, ride to the south. Panic rippled through the camp. Sarah watched as the Apache moved with efficient urgency, packing, hiding supplies, readying horses. Grey Wolf came to her side, calm amid the storm. "If we must run, you ride with the women and children," he said, pressing something into her hand. It was a knife, beautifully balanced, deadly sharp. "This is for protection," he said, "but also for choice. Some things are worse than death. Every person must decide for themselves what those things are." Sarah met his gaze and nodded. "I understand." That night the soldiers never came, but Sarah understood now that this was no life of peace. It was a life lived on the edge of danger and survival. Yet it was also a life of purpose. And somewhere between fear and firelight, she realized she was no longer just surviving among them. She was becoming one of them. The new moon rose over the canyon, thin and pale as a blade. Sarah woke to the sound of drums, slow at first, like the heartbeat of the earth. Outside her shelter, the camp glowed with firelight. Women painted their faces with red ochre and white clay. Men prepared drums and rattles. Nadza entered with a bundle of clothes, a deerskin dress beautifully beaded, soft as breath. "Tonight is sacred," Nadza said, helping her dress. "New moon, new beginning. Spirits decide who belongs and who does not." Sarah's hands trembled as Nadza braided her hair with feathers and turquoise beads. "What must I do?" "Listen, watch. When it is time, you will know." The canyon became alive with rhythm. Drums echoed off stone walls, voices lifted in song. The air pulsed with something ancient, something that reached deep inside Sarah's bones. The fire blazed high, throwing sparks into the dark sky. Itachu began the chant, her voice low and powerful. The women joined in, and soon the whole camp was singing. The words were beyond Sarah's understanding, but she felt their meaning: grief, hope, endurance, and joy. Then the dance began. One by one, men and women moved around the fire, their steps telling stories of hunts, of storms, of birth and death. The drums grew louder, faster. The ground itself seemed to hum. Kaiwen pulled Sarah forward. "You dance now." Quote. "I don't know the steps," Sarah said quickly. "There are no steps," Kaiwen said with a rare smile. "Only truth." Sarah hesitated, then moved into the circle. At first, her steps were clumsy, but soon her body found its own rhythm. The music took over. She wasn't thinking of what to do. She was simply feeling. The fear, the loss, the wonder. All of it flowed out of her in motion. When she looked across the fire, Grey Wolf was watching her, his expression unreadable, his eyes burning like coals. As the drums shifted, he stepped forward, his tall frame cutting through the crowd. The dancers moved aside, forming a circle around them. He held out his hand. Sarah took it. The music softened. Grey Wolf spoke in Apache, his voice deep and steady. Sarah couldn't understand the words, but she heard her name, Nada, woven through them like a promise. Itachu came forward with a woven blanket, marked with mountain and river designs. She placed it over their shoulders, covering them both. Then she spoke, her tone solemn and proud. The crowd cheered. Nadza clapped. Kaiwen smiled. Sarah looked at Grey Wolf, confused but breathless. "What just happened?" she whispered. He looked at her, eyes shining in the firelight. "You became my wife," he said simply. "If you accept it." Sarah's heart pounded. "You should have asked first." "I am asking now," he said softly, "in front of my people and the spirits. Will you walk with me, wherever this path leads?" Sarah looked around, at the faces that had once been hostile but now glowed with warmth. At Itachu, whose hard eyes now held something like affection. These people had become her world. And the man before her, the warrior who had destroyed her home and rebuilt her spirit, had become her truth. "Yes," she said, "I will." The cheer that rose up from the camp shook the canyon walls. The drums quickened again, and the dancing returned, joyful, wild, free. Later that night, when the celebration quieted and the fire burned low, Grey Wolf led her away to a new shelter, larger than the rest, its entrance covered with painted hides. Inside, the air was warm, the fire gentle. Sarah stood uncertain for a moment until Grey Wolf removed his headband, setting it aside with quiet reverence. "Are you afraid?" he asked softly, echoing the question from the first day they met. Sarah met his eyes. "No, not anymore." He smiled, and in that quiet shelter, two souls from different worlds came together, not in fear or conquest, but in choice. What followed was not passion born of desperation, but tenderness born of trust, the kind of connection that needed no language. The warrior who once spoke only of duty now spoke through his hands, gentle and careful. And Sarah, who had been raised to hide her heart, finally let it be seen. When dawn came, she lay with her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. For the first time since her mother's death, she felt whole. Weeks passed. Sarah became part of the rhythm of camp life. The other women accepted her, the children adored her, and Itachu began teaching her the old medicines, which plants healed burns, which eased childbirth, which called back strength after fever. One morning, as she ground corn beside Nadza, she paused and pressed a hand to her stomach. A strange flutter moved within her. Nadza noticed. "You are with child," she said simply. Sarah's heart leapt, a life growing within her, half Apache, half the world she'd left behind. When she told Grey Wolf, he looked at her for a long moment before gathering her in his arms. "This child," he said quietly, "is proof that two worlds can become one." The months passed, and Sarah's belly grew round. The camp called her Nadashima, the mother who keeps stories. She sang to the baby in all three languages she knew: English, Spanish, and the Apache words Grey Wolf taught her. But peace in the desert was fragile. Scouts brought grim news. Soldiers were drawing nearer. Each night, Grey Wolf's men took turns watching from the ridges. Sarah knew it was only a matter of time. When the attack came, it was dawn. The first shot shattered the stillness, followed by screams. Sarah grabbed her bundle of herbs and the knife Grey Wolf had given her. The camp exploded into chaos. Women running with children, men rushing to defend. She saw Kaiwan fall, then Nadza carrying a wounded boy. Through the smoke, she saw Grey Wolf fighting, fierce and fearless, his rifle cracking again and again. Their eyes met across the battlefield. "Go!" he shouted. She shook her head, crying his name. He turned his horse toward her, charging through gunfire. For a heartbeat, he was almost there, and then the bullets found him. He fell from his horse as she screamed his name again and again. The world blurred, sound fading to nothing but the rush of her heartbeat. When she woke again, she was in a white tent, a field hospital. A man in uniform told her she was safe, that the Apache were dead. "The child," she whispered. The doctor looked away. "I'm sorry." The word echoed like a shot in her chest. Later, when they brought her father to her bedside, he called it rescue. He called it salvation. But Sarah knew better. Her world had ended in that canyon. Her heart lay buried with Grey Wolf. And yet deep inside her, something still burned. Weeks later, in the silence of her father's Tucson home, Sarah discovered what the doctor hadn't seen. Life still growing within her. A second heartbeat. Grey Wolf's last gift. And with that discovery, she made her choice once more. She would run. She would protect this child. And she would carry Grey Wolf's story, their story, into a world